Orange is the New Black is the personal story of a woman traveling through the prison system. In an effort to maintain herself and her sanity, she shares how she dealt with the trials and tribulations while doing her time. She learns to have the most regard within herself and judge for herself who she wants to be after this obstacle. However, she never forgets to remember what life was like prior to prison, to show herself who she wants to be after being released. If she were to focus on her predicament and wallow in her despair, she would not emerge the same person who went in. The unspoken rules of Danbury led her to realize her place in prison society and free society. She realized by ignoring the war on drugs, she was an accomplice to their addiction, as presented on page 180. She realized the uselessness of locking up kids because the neighborhoods they returned to were more desperate and dangerous than gyms, page 249. Herman not only learned about the justice system, but she also learned more about herself and the value of sisterhood and strong bonds within your life. Without the support from friends and family and her husband, she says she would have lost her mind. Her friends and family sent letters and books to help her remember the outside, and her parents and fiancé visited often, giving her something to hold on to until the next visit. Herman uses italics, as on pages 144, 145, and 177, to relate a song or poem back to her life prior to prison, a free life. Through her own self-discipline and support from others in her life, she was able to make the best of her situation and learn along the way, without losing herself like many had done before her. This brings me to my own story. I may not have delivered drug money or been sent to a prison, but I have and am enduring my own sense of prison. I question my every word and my every move in my prison. I situate myself in the opportune place to avoid questions and arguments in my prison. I seek support from the outside to keep me sane while I do my time, and I consider my mark on my prison and what I learned from it. This prison of mine is my home. It is not so much the physical restraint and entrapment as the mental imprisonment. I am trapped within myself. I cannot be myself in my own home. The summer after my sophomore year, my conservative mother came upon my sexuality and homosexual relationship. That summer was the closest I had ever been to a physical prison. I was trapped inside the same walls for 2 months, only to go outside under the supervision of my parents. My mother and father were my correction officers. Like prison, I was cut from the outside world. I was prohibited to have internet access or contact with anyone I had prior. Essentially, I had dropped off the face of the cubed earth my mother saw. My loved ones on the outside, my friends, didn't hear from me again until my mother gave me her approved contacts I was permitted to call under her watch. This meant 6 names on 2 index cards. This consisted of my religious friends, my best friend, and a few choice men. I had little interest in contacting anyone, because I had already begun to lose myself as Piper Kerman did. For 2 months, I had nothing but time to learn about myself and the system I was in. Nearly 40% of the homeless population is LGBTQ+, encouraged by parental rejection. I realized what was really important to me and what was not. As people who experience near-death situations appreciate the little things more, I appreciated the bonds I had, the company of my cat, and I no longer cared about the tiny tribulations and gossip of teenage life. I was hit with an obstacle that forced me to mature over a very short period of time. All of a sudden, I was required to fight for myself, maintain my own sanity, and realize what path I wanted to take. I could live a life of teenage freedom and have a decent relationship with my parents at the cost of my own personality and true happiness. Or I could object to my family, live a few years under their absolute control, break some ties, pull myself together and fight for myself and happiness at the cost of my relationship with my mother. I chose the latter. I chose myself over others that day. I endured those months between school years, maintaining myself through the support I knew I had on the outside world that I just didn't have in my home. I avoided conflict the best I could. I chose my battles. I purposely avoided my room for the fear that my mother would use my isolation against me or corner me like a scared animal to reprimand me. I chose to live those months on the couch downstairs because even though I was doing the same down there as I would have in my room, it gave them the illusion that I was complying to them. This bought me time to reflect and strengthen myself for the next encounter. As Piper Kerman had, to watch her steps and relations in prison, I have to as well. Every day I returned home from school, I would walk into a whir of questions and negativity. I was threatened with being sent to a private Christian school, moving across the country, and even threatened with my past relations. My mother would use my past against me. But regardless of her words, I focused on who I wanted to be, not who she wanted me to be. Piper Kerman was forced to endure a system that was built to break you down, not build you up. This did not hinder her in her efforts to grow as a person and focus on herself. She hinted at her future and past through music and poems in italics, as I hint at my future and past through thoughts. Italics represent herself and not others, as my voice is my own. She embraced what her prison had to offer and learned about herself. She learned how to help others less fortunate than her, to not be an accomplice to their addictions, page 180, as I learned how to support others in the way I had been supported. I learned to let down my guard to new people as she learned to, because even inmates can be kind-hearted and gentle, page 81. Kerman learned to be comfortable in her prison, yet knew to remain cautious of the unknown, as I learned to maintain my relationship with my family while being cautious of their perspective along with my own, page 104. I may not have traveled to Chicago with thousands of dollars in drug money. I may not have been sent to a federal prison, but I can learn from someone who did. I can use her something to learn outlook in my own prison, and I can look to her persistence and gain something from the experience, and to not lose who I am in the process. As she worded it, you try to adjust and acclimate, yet remain ready to go home every single day. It's not easy to do. Page 124. Without the hardships we endure, we would not learn about the world and ourselves in the way we do now. There is always something new to learn, a new opportunity in every situation. Piper Kerman chose to make the best of it, as I do now. The question is, will you take that opportunity or remain in the blind? Will you yearn to grow and persist, or will you submit into the darkness only to emerge a different person? Personally, I don't like the dark, and I'm willing to learn everything I can about this world I live in and where I can inspire others, as Piper Kerman did me.